Welcome to the launch of Positive Perspectives, a podcast from Glow Consultancy London, where we speak with expert guests who bring lived experiences, meaningful lessons, and personal stories designed to spark transformation and deepen our collective understanding of what it really means to thrive. As a part of World Wellbeing Week, we're amplifying voices that illuminate the diverse and often overlooked aspects of well-being that include emotional clarity, creativity, connection, and today's focus is joy as a form of resilience. Today, I'm joined by Jackie G. Michaels, also known as Miss J, who's a seasoned expert in the field of leadership and personal development. With over 30 years' experience, she is one of the forerunners of designing personal development and coaching programs for professionals in the UK. And she's also got a loads of knowledge and experience and a personality that has resulted in media appearances, working discreetly with high-profile individuals, as well as public and private organizations. She's a joyful disruptor and a guide for those who are ready to live and lead authentically. Hi, Jackie. Good to
Hi, I
see
love that intro.
you.
Thank you so much. I feel really honoured that I am part of the launch.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
Yeah, well,
you.
thank you. And am I calling you Miss J or Jackie?
Listen, I at first when my clients used to call me Miss J, and I think they were younger than me, and they'd speak and they go Miss J. And at first I didn't even realise it was a nickname, and I've embraced it. So it's up to you if you want to call me Miss J, Jackie, I will respond.
Brilliant. I'm loving you embracing that. Well, let's go with Jackie. So, Jackie,
Okay.
let's tell us a bit more about yourself and what you'll be sharing with us today.
I always like to say that I am a audacious woman who has had the pleasure of seeing joy from a very young age. I grew up in a Caribbean family in the UK, and joy was part of our staple. I didn't realize it. You don't realize it until you look back at it. And today we're recording on Windrush Day, and it's phenomenal because I'm just saying we are such an amazing, resilient people. And for me, joy was pivotal for that. So I have been working in human resources. I worked in human resources for quite a long period of time, about 15 years, and then I got burnt out. And when I got burnt, I had to make a decision. Was I going to continue to go back, or was I going to follow my heart and my dream? And I've always been involved in coaching and developing training programs. It felt natural for me to become a consultant. And I never see it as a job, I see it as a purpose. During COVID, I started to think about joy, but I work with people discreetly, as you said, but I also work with organizations, and I really am passionate about networking. I am the ambassador for Albright, for the Black Women of Albright. I like to go and visit other networks and really inspire human resource departments to embrace joy as well. So that's me. Disruptor, cultivator. It's about really looking at how we can anchor joy and use this as a framework for sustainable success.
So much information, so much joy coming from you today.
Thank you.
I'm really in like the reflection of the personal aspect and the journey of joy, and actually bringing awareness to the history of where joy has come from for you.
So I was meditating. I've been a meditator for over 30 years. And when I was meditating during COVID, I kept hearing Black Joy. And I was like, really? I ignored it. Second time, third time. I said, okay, Jackie. And then when I started to think about how my life has been and the perspective of the Black community, it wasn't really seen in a joyful way. So I said, let me go on this journey. And I went on this journey to really understand, what does joy mean? Let's look at a Black joy renaissance. We are resilient. Of course, we are resilient. And we have been through many, many challenges. But I looked and I realized that joy has been a significant aspect of our survival. So what happens now when we look at joy from a thriving perspective? And as my background is leadership, personal growth, my clients, I said, why don't I look at it from the perspective of work? And if you say to someone, do you enjoy work? I wouldn't like to do a poll, but it's not the word that you would relate to work, joy.
Mm.
That's why I started to look at it. And I've been seeing some phenomenal results in people's shift in their perspective and their mindset. So that's where I've decided to kind of look at joy in the workplace, but it actually started from me looking at it from a personal perspective.
And usually that journey resonates with many people.
Absolutely.
And bringing what was very interesting also was that you used the word purpose, not career, not a job, but
Yeah,
a purpose.
yeah,
And when you're in this arena, this industry of coaching and developing people and supporting people, that whole purpose becomes so much more amplified. I always say that this is the best job ever, but it's not the job, it's the
yeah.
experience.
You can have joy in so many different ways. Even if you've got a career or a job, you can find joy. And that's the most important thing because I think that it's the little things that will create a joy, even when there are challenges. The example I sometimes use is if you go to a Caribbean funeral, you'll see grief and you then see joy. You see people dancing. And I always explain to my non-Caribbean friends, you're going to come to this funeral and you're going to see people partying, maybe doing the candy dance. They are grieving, but they also will intertwine joy. So when we look at joy and careers and our purpose, it's all intertwined and it can be so fulfilling when you look at it from that perspective as well.
That sort of juxtaposition of joy and grief, how does that sit?
When we look at it, I always say that joy is on a continuum. Joy, grief. This isn't toxic positivity. I always say to people, that you're going to get challenges in life. Oh, something's going to happen that will not come under the category of joy. It may well be draining. It may be unfulfilling. So that may be at the end of the continuum. And then you have joy. But it's about how do I fill my joy cup? And when I fill my joy cup, how does this provide a buffer during this period? So it's not toxic positivity because sometimes we like, oh, I'm fine. Yeah, everything's great in my world. No, you're going to have challenges.
Mm.
And I think the most important thing to remember is that we are emotional beings and we're not trying to ignore the grief aspects and just be happy.
Mm.
Happy, 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 happy. Because it's different. It's completely different.
Yeah, people always say to me that you're really positive and things like that. And I am a positive person, but that doesn't mean I don't have challenges. It doesn't mean it's my choice to, through the
Absolutely.
challenge, through the journey, to take a positive, reflect on it in a positive way and manage the journey as best I can.
Absolutely. And I think what we're looking at here is, the lessons, the self-awareness, the understanding, all these different aspects of ourselves. But at the same time, I will say there are some times that, the emotion of overwhelmment, the emotion of anger, the emotion of shame. These are emotions.
Mm.
And once I acknowledge with my clients and with myself that I am not my emotions, let me feel them and move on. That's fine. So I don't have to always be positive. I give myself permission to not be positive sometimes.
Yeah.
And I say to my clients, please, if you see me in Marks and Spencer's and I'm having a go, they say, is that joyful person? I'm just on the other end of the continuum. All right. I'm just having a bad day. And we can have bad days as well as still look at how can I fill my joy cup.
And we're all human
Absolutely.
and we're all not perfect.
Please, Glow Consultancy. Miss J is not perfect. I don't want to be perfect because
Yeah.
it sets you up to fail. Really.
Yes, exactly. So you've discussed the Joy Cup. I'm really intrigued to know. Tell us about the Joy Cup.
One of the things that I realized was that there is a difference between happiness and joy. Happiness is based on external. and someone can make you happy and you can search for happiness, the pursuit of happiness, Will
Mm.
Smith. And that's not what joy is. Joy is an internal state. It's a feeling that you get. It's like love. And one of the things that I do when I do the Joy Audit Masterclass is I get people to tap into their joy. And where does joy sit with you? And sometimes it can be the heart, sometimes it can be the stomach. It varies. But joy is an internal state. It may feel like happiness, but happiness is external. So what I say is start looking at how you can fill your joy cup because the challenges are going to be over there. And then we're also going to fill our joy cup with different things. So I have a variety of things that I like. Of course, meditation is one. Music. We all have challenges, at this present moment, going through a challenge with my mum. She hasn't been well. And there are some days that I go for a sound bath. And the sound bath will just fill me up with joy and release all the emotions. And
Mm.
then other times I will play music. So I like soca, and I like soul, and I like reggae. I like a variety of music, but soca is the one music that makes me feel joyful. And I'll be singing it on the road. Please, if you see me singing with my headsets in, I'm just filling my cup
Mm.
because I'm totally aware that there are challenges in life. But I also want to make sure that my joy cup is filled. One of the things is that joy isn't, sometimes it's not, and it can be the five-star hotel. It can be that, I'm not saying it can't be the super luxury things, but it can be the simple things. I can remember sitting in the park with a friend and we did have a bottle of champagne and we were sitting down and just talking, sitting down with a picnic, simple.
Yeah.
Or it could be just going for a walk, a variety of things. And I know people listed so many different things like connecting with my niece and doing things that really touches your heart. What was on your list?
Wow, I had a few on my list. Dancing was definitely one.
Okay.
I'm also a member of a choir, so singing was
Ah,
another one. And those simple things, as you were saying, nature is always a blessing in terms of you focus on something bigger than yourself. And
okay.
when you're walking in nature and the air is pure, but you just feel at one, really.
Yes.
And it's a different pace.
Yeah, it really is. And I will also say as well that when we look at it from a work perspective, that you can do it through having connections at work. You can do it through contributing at work. And that's that idea about purpose. You can do it by having relief even when you're at work, you can fill your cup at work. And that's one of the things that I go through when I speak to leaders as well. How can we create a more joyful environment so that people can choose joy and tap into their joy? So yes,
Yeah.
the joy cup needs to be filled. And I will say as well, it's about filling it on a regular basis. It's not, oh my God, there's a crisis. I need to fill my joy cup. I need to fill myself up with joy. No, just regular daily rituals. Start your day with the idea of having moments of joy.
That's a real nugget because sometimes we can save things up
Yeah.
until the end of the day or save things up
Yeah.
until there's a moment where we feel that we can give ourselves, be kind to ourselves, compassionate to ourselves,
Wear your
and give
best
ourselves grace.
clothes. Yeah, wear your best clothes.
Yeah. So for me, I routinely during the day have times where I have to get away from the computer and the
Good.
noise, if you like, and whatever that might be just a cup of tea, that might be opening the window and looking at the sun, that might be breathing and just being still with myself.
Good.
So there's a variety of ways that I capture my joy moment.
Absolutely. And, be aware that you are going to have what I will call joy blockers.
Yeah.
You're going to have them. You're going to have the meetings that you think that they're a waste of time, performative feedback, somebody else. There's going to be joy blockers. And of course, you're going to have strategies on how you deal with them. But I think when you have that mindset anchored in joy, you approach it differently. If we look at work, we have a crisis. We have a burnout crisis. 85% of the UK population say that they experience burnout. This
Yeah.
is a figure that we need to look at. And I also was speaking to someone today, and they were saying that, the next generation are not putting up with it. They're leaving, they're getting the training, and they're going, no, it's not for me. So what do we do? What are we going to put in place to ensure that we retain staff, as well as staff feeling fulfilled and healthy, both physically and mentally at work?
Yeah, really. And that's about developing this culture of well-being and
Absolutely.
joy being a part of that, but also holistic being as well. So whole being in terms of
Absolutely.
those connections external to or financial situations, or as you were saying, connections, etc.
Yeah, it's quite interesting because one of the things I remember years ago when I was in HR, I used to do a lot of inductions. I remember a diagram I used to do, and I used to say, this is work, this is your personal life, and they overlap. Don't try to separate them too much. I said, I know they're saying that you should separate them, but you're going to bring yourself to work, your whole self. And if there is something that's not happening or things not going well, please come and see me. I always had that concept because I just didn't really understand it. And I do a lot of work with being authentic. And I'm writing my book on, the fact that we wear a mask and it's time for us to unmask, because I see that when you unmask, you are winning. And when you're your authentic self, you win. But it's that stage, the courage to do that.
Yeah.
And joy can provide you with that feeling of, I'm going to be okay. And I love the fact that you brought in the idea of the holistic aspect, because one of the things that I talk about, joy zones, and it's like a pathway to joy. And it's just a way in which you can do an audit to see which zone am I lacking in. I really had to look at connection at one point, especially, I'm an overgiver.
Mm.
Coaches always have similar personalities. We like to give. And I had to look at my circle and say, well, is my circle in regards to my business circle, is it reciprocal? Am I working? And that's when I decided to join some networks, and I got involved in members clubs, because it's important that you find a network that supports you, as well as the validation is another zone, the recognition. All these aspects can provide you with a pathway to your joy. Whole being is so, so important.
Yeah,
So
there was a comment that you made around taking that first step and the courageousness of doing that. Say it's going to networking or other, associations, communities, if you like, then really being discerning about which relationships are going to encourage you, build you up, bring that joy, and
absolutely.
which ones aren't, or which communities are going to do that in general.
Absolutely. And I think as well, sometimes we can be overcautious. And I say to my clients, let's take a first step, a small step, because you're going to go and you're going to find a community that may not serve you, but you're going to get some lessons from it. But find a circle, find a community, because this is a pathway to joy. But you have to bring your authentic self and be very clear about what you want from the connection. And when we look at connections, you can, in the business world, we've got mentors, we've got sponsors, we've got allies, we've got all these different people that can support us. But I always say, go away and really think about, what is it that you want? What is it that you're cultivating? All of these things are important. And these are just pathways to joy at work. And it's important for us to remember, as well as connections outside. If you've got outside activities that are draining you, connections that are draining you, you've got to ask yourself, is it serving me?
And in a world where we're bombarded by media and every minute there's something new to be a part of, the FOMO element of it all is kind of a bit overwhelming.
Absolutely. It can be overwhelming. And one of the things that I talk about is, what do you really want? Sometimes we people please due to we do not want to be left out. We don't want to be seen in a particular way. And I come from a giving family. I come from people pleasers. So I'm a people pleaser in rehab. I let that go. I had to really look at it because it was causing me. Remember, I had burnout. So when you have burnout, you look at everything. And as I overcome my autoimmune disease that I had, and I went back into balance, I thought, right, what area do I have to look at? And people pleasing was one. And one of the things that I always say when we start to look at joy is, you no longer people please, because it's a killer.
Mm.
purpose, please. Looking at your purpose, look at your purpose and say, how am I pleasing that? And balancing it and balancing that concept in your mind. The other thing is you're going to get out of alignment sometimes, but your journey is always, how can I go back into alignment? I know I spoke to you about the word balance. I say there is no balance in my life. Sometimes I'm working at 12 o'clock and that doesn't look like work-life balance. However, I feel it's in alignment with my purpose. And then I make sure that I rest the following day to ensure that my body's back into alignment. It's overwhelming out there.
Yes.
Really it is, Marie. But we've got to be so conscious not to get down the social media rabbit holes.
Yeah. Yes, totally. You mentioned purpose. How did you find your purpose? For those listening, what are the first steps for finding their purpose, would you say?
When I first started to look at the word purpose, I think it can sometimes be quite grandiose. And I started off with, what was my purpose? And I always said, my purpose was just to feel good. My purpose was to be happy. My purpose was to be joyful. And then I started to look at the idea of there is a unique me. What are the attributes that are coming through all the time? Not comparing, because we know comparing is a thief. It will just drain you. What is it about me? What do I think are my given talents? And it was writing, it was speaking, it was leading. And I noticed as well, people like to be around me, all right? And people like to go away with me. So some of these different things was happening and I just embraced it. And delivering training, writing training came easy to me. Presenting is easy for me. So all of these things, you sometimes have to look at it. And I say as well, when you're creating your vision, look at the essence of it. Look at the essence of it and you'll see the purpose, because sometimes we're so caught up in the finer detail, but there is an essence.
Yeah.
So the essence of mine is joy, abundance, freedom, and it just shows up in different ways. And if we try to make it really, really complicated, we'll always be searching. Just see your life, see your world, and purpose will unfold.
Yes. Thank you for that. Bringing your values, when you start looking at you'll start to understand what your values are, because you've actually mentioned a few as you were talking around purpose as well.
Yeah, and I think, I always say that our parents can provide a foundation for that. And my dad was a very principled man, very, very principled. It was all about integrity. So that's one of my values. Joy was one of his values as well. We will get ideas and snippets from a very, very young age. And I say that your values are your values. Yeah. Your purpose is your purpose. Keep it in a safe container. Yeah. And when you're ready, share it.
I love that. Thank you. That's great. So we had this kind of theme about the joy audit, rediscovering your joy. And that was some sort of framework that we were discussing for success. I'd like you to tell us a bit more about that.
So when you look at a framework always provides a route and some tools. So we have joy as an anchor, and we realize that joy is there to provide you with that guidance as to what's important. The framework for me, when we start to look at joy in the workplace, I see it as a beginning. How do you want your organization to be perceived by your employees? And well-being has to come into this. So what joy is saying is that this is a framework for sustainable success. We realize that joy can be an anchor that you use, and we want you to go through, first of all, understanding what blocks you, what boosts you. And when you look at that, and the first thing is as well, asking yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? Are you drained? Are you feeling joyful? And that's the level of self-awareness. And then once we do that, we have to also look at the different zones that we go. There are 8 zones. I mentioned recognition, I mentioned connection, and there's also growth. But some people don't need the growth aspect. There are some people that have been totally mentored out and they've got so many different courses. And it could be, contribution. It could be your health and your physical well-being. So it's about going through those 8 zones and then having regular reviews around that and saying, right, today I was 5 What am I today? Where am I? And using this and understanding that the areas that drain you,
Mm.
and what can I do about it? And then you can always take the audit into your coaching experiences or your mentoring experiences or with your leaders and start talking about it. Because the objective is this: we know that joy has a significant effect on your well-being,
Yeah.
heart health, physical, mental. It covers so many, and we are now more aware of our nervous system and that the fight and flight is actually causing people to burn out. It's causing illnesses, and I always say that it nearly killed me.
Yeah.
I was extremely ill. So the framework for me is something that you use side by side from a retention as well as to promote it for people who want to join your company. Because I'd like to be in a company that looked at my well-being and my joy. I'd be like, sign me up. So the framework is really from a cultural perspective as well for organizations as well as on an individual. Because the toolkit, what I do is I go and do masterclasses, and I call it audacious alignment and the power of joy. Because I think that we have to be quite audacious now. And the community that we have and the generation that we have coming up are a little bit more audacious than when I came through for work. But I also created a toolkit that people could use on a personal level, just in case, your organization says, no, we're not interested in joy. Well, you need to be interested in joy, because it really is one of those things that when I started to look at how it builds your resilience, it strengthens your relationships, it's fundamental for our
Yeah.
well-being. It really is.
Brilliant. It's interesting in terms of the younger generation or the generation that is coming into work right now. And as we were discussing before, how their idea of what the work space should look like is not necessarily the same as what the existing workplace, some
Yeah,
workplaces may look
yeah,
like. And to have a culture that celebrates well-being, whole being, and joy is very much in favor of a new generation wanting to be,
absolutely.
to be employed by
A-
an organization.
Absolutely. I'd like to be employed by an organization like that. I work with quite a lot of high achievers, young high achievers, and we can say, no, 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 that's not how work is. You've got to accept it. It's just the way it is. Or organization can say, we're not getting the best.
Mm.
We're not recruiting the best. And the best are not staying. What can we do? What can we do to um, increase their loyalty? I heard somebody say that someone just did a 3-day training, got recruited, blah, blah, blah. And the fourth day said, wasn't very keen on how they spoke to me and left.
Yeah.
On the Joy program, I would provide them with tools to assist them with that, because you are going to have obstacles. You're going to have to look at ways in which you have some form of mental and emotional relief at work. You're going to have to look at how you connect with people. And if there is a difficulty, what can you do to support that? And what do you do in those circumstances? The person just left. So organizations have choices,
Mm.
individuals have choices. And I'm now saying, let's choose to have joy as an aspect of the working environment if we want the best.
And that's important because not only will you have the best, as you were saying before, retain the best and
Absolutely.
have a culture where people want to thrive and give the best.
Definitely. You see, and also remember, generations have changed. When my parents started working the Windrush era, they were looking at survival. And I remember when I left my HR job, my mum was like, are you sure? What
Mm.
are you doing? Stay. No, you can't. I said, no, mum, I won't survive. And then when I started to look at thriving and my personal development, my well-being, years ago, it wasn't seen as the thing to do. Now, we've got it everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, people are being much more open and vulnerable and authentic in what they want from the workplace and
Yeah.
life in general.
And that's really important for as the workplaces evolve and as we have also hybrid working spaces as well. We need to kind of stay connected, ensure that everybody is working to the best of their ability and enjoying work to a certain extent. So
Yeah.
even enjoying has the word joy
Yes,
as well.
absolutely. And why shouldn't we enjoy work? Why
Yeah.
shouldn't we?
Yes.
And what's going to happen when we enjoy work? I know it's going to reduce stress. And they say it reduces inflammation as well. When we look at the effects of stress, it's high cortisol. Your nervous system becomes depleted. So there's so much more, sickness rates, etc. Now, this isn't, and I will say, I'm not talking about having pool tables at work. I'm not saying about having novelty activities. When we really start looking at the impact and the power of joy at work, we don't want to put it down to things like pool tables, pizza at lunch. I'm not saying that's not a bad thing, or after work drinks. I'm not saying that's bad, but it's really looking on an individual, bespoke level. What brings you joy? What's going to fill your cup in the work environment? And that to me is really, really important because we're worth it. Well,
Yeah.
we are really worth it. We're deserving of this in a working environment. We do not have to be at work and be depleted and sad. And I think that people are realizing that more and more.
Because as we become more that well, the rates of burnout increase, everyone's going to look for an answer, a solution to that. And it's not
Definitely.
only burnout one time, it's a repeated burnout that impacts on your health in a negative way. So you're going to live with that situation, and your health is going to live with that situation.
Mm.
And then it's more difficult to have joy
It's the
or
last thing
well-being.
on your mind because all you're concerned about is the physical aspect. So let's start by having a preventative model. Start in the beginning, start looking at what can I do to cultivate joy? What can I do to diminish this particular joy blocker? Whatever it is, and what can I do to shift my mindset and look at the different zones and work through them and say, this is my joy and this is my job and this is my career, this is my purpose, and I've decided that I'm going to choose joy as my anchor.
Right. So
Sustainable success.
sustainable success.
Yes,
Yes.
sustainable. But lots of people are getting success and they're just not happy. And I have clients who financially great, but are they happy?
So we started to talk about productivity and how we can overextend ourselves, and also how we're not really present for ourselves or burnt out or overwhelmed. How do you support people to make joy a non-negotiable?
I think you have to make a personal choice. You have to make it a personal choice and just start by doing it. Put it in your diary. I like to put things in my diary. I put work obligations or family, obligations in my diary. My joy activities go in my diary. I think as well, this comes back to organizations as well. There's self-awareness as well as the responsibility of the organization. Leaders saying, right, so how are you cultivating your joy? We have to look at how we keep ourselves in alignment and allowing people to not feel guilty when they're having joyful activity, because that can sometimes happen.
Yeah.
So the non-negotiable comes with that, making that internal decision. I am choosing joy.
Mm.
It's a mindset. I have a tattoo on choose joy because, that's a non-negotiable. And if you find it difficult, seek help.
Yeah.
Counseling, therapy, speak to your circle. Why do I want joy in my life? Because this isn't about being overly optimistic. And I want everybody to really be aware. I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm talking about a way of being that will ensure that you do not go down the line of burnout,
Mm.
that you become very aware of your emotions, you understand where you are on the continuum, and you're constantly looking at filling your joy cup because you're aware that challenges are going to happen. And you find your own way, your own pathway towards joy.
Well said. So, as we're coming to the end of our discussion, what I've kind of gleaned from this sense of joy, one, it's about a choice.
Absolutely.
Two, it's about you really being aware, having it align with your values and your purpose. And really, what do you want from your world? What do you want this world, your life to look like? And that mindset of and choice of choosing joy over other avenues that might take you down the road of burnout, because burnout is something that's very prevalent in our society today.
Absolutely. And I also want to say this. You may be in a really challenging job, and you may say to me, but Jackie, my job isn't joyful and it's challenging and I'm in conflict. That's fine, but still have moments of joy. We need it. That's how we thrive. That's how we navigate this world. It's not about it being perfect.
Jackie, I've just got one more question to ask you. What takeaway would you give our audience?
Make the choice. Make the choice to choose joy and see it as a framework for sustainable success, not success that I've got to really burn myself out to get the prize. Look at it as an anchor that you can use for your life and your career.
With that, Miss J, Jackie G. Michaels, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank,
Very insightful discussion.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me.